Good morning to all of you here in Copenhagen. Welcome to all the others who are joining remotely. As you all know, all editions of the Olympic Games are different, and each and every of them is unique due to its specificities and local context. But as we heard yesterday from the Vice Mayor of Copenhagen, Meja, here in Copenhagen, we don't say either or. We say both and. So here we can really say that Tokyo 2020 was both unique and extraordinary. This was, as it was reminded, the first ever editions of the Olympic Games to be postponed. It was the first ever edition to take place in a pandemic. And it was a great demonstration of collective resilience and a proof that there is hope at the end of the tunnel. And there was nothing more rewarding, believe me, than to see the sparkles in the eyes of the athletes after so many years of hard work, of all of us. That, as the President said yesterday, a demonstration that we can only go faster, higher, and stronger if we work very closely with each other and if we stand together in solidarity. So this morning, we'll look back at three perspectives on the Games. The first one from the host city, Tokyo Metropolitan Government. The second one from an international federation, and we'll have a discussion with the International Hockey Federation. And the third perspective will be from the International Olympic Committee itself. So let's start with the video recorded from Katsura Enyo, a Director General at Tokyo Metropolitan Government.
This is Tokyo, a city on the cutting edge. This is Tokyo, a city of peace. This is Tokyo, an experience to enjoy.
Hello everyone, I am Katsura Enyo, Director General of Bureau of Olympic and Paralympic Games Tokyo 2020 preparation of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. Thank you very much for inviting me to the Smart City and Sports Summit. After about a month of excitement, the Tokyo 2020 Games have concluded successfully. The Games faced unexpected challenges with 1 year postponement and without spectators. However, thanks to the support and cooperations nationally and internationally, we were able to deliver the safe and secure games. Once again, I'd like to thank all of you. From now on, I'd like to talk about what we have achieved through the most challenging games, hoping our effort will be a new model for the future games and will be of some help for other cities in times of crisis. This is an overview of the Games. During this period, exciting competitions of 33 sports were staged at the Olympics and 22 sports at the Paralympics. Among the 33 Olympic sports, the circled 5 sports were additional for Tokyo 2020 Games: baseball, softball, karate, skateboarding, sport climbing, and surfing. Out of these, skateboarding, sport climbing, and surfing have been adopted for the Paris Games as well. Among the 22 Paralympic sports, taekwondo and badminton were adopted as new sports, and they both will be passed on to the Paris. Regarding the venues, we had 43 venues across the country, mainly in Tokyo, but also in the areas affected by the earthquake and tsunami in 2011. Now, let me talk about the values of holding the Tokyo Games. The Olympic Games welcomed about 11,000 athletes from 205 countries and regions, tying the Olympic record. And the Paralympic Games welcomed the record 4,400 athletes, representing 162 countries and regions. The athletes performed at a high level, making 26 new world records at the Olympics and 157 at the Paralympics. The Games were also rich in diversity, with a record number of openly LGBTQ athletes. Furthermore, the proportion of female athletes was the highest ever. As for the feedback, we have received many voices that the Games were a great success. During the Games, so many teams and federations showed great gratitude to Tokyo for holding the safe and secure Games despite the historical challenge. I believe that by hosting the game, we were able to reunite the world divided by COVID-19 through the power of sport and to give courage and hope to people around the world. Now, I'd like to talk about our countermeasures against COVID-19 for the Games. To deliver a safe and secure Games during the pandemic, we took countermeasures such as decreasing in number of visitors from overseas, and in collaboration with organizer committee and the national government, ensuring the border enforcement measures and tests according to the playbook. As a result of these efforts, the positivity rate of athletes and stakeholders from overseas was both lower than initially projected. In addition, there was not a single case of infection spreading in the athlete village. Experts have given us positive feedback, including the games were conducted safely, and the bubble and the COVID-19 testing protocols at the athlete village worked very well. The effective reproduction number, which represents how many people are likely to be infected by one infected person, peaked on July 21st, and it began to decrease to 0.68 on September 5th, the day the Paralympic was closed. Even after the Games, the numbers of infected persons and severe patients continued to decrease, and in October, the declaration of a state of emergency was lifted. People in Japan are now gradually recovering their daily lives. Now, I'd like to show the major initiatives of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government, TMG. In addition to supporting the organizing committee, TMG conducted various initiatives to further develop the matured city, Tokyo, taking the opportunity of the Games. Since we didn't have an Olympic park and the venues were spread out, the impact on urban functions were extensive. Therefore, we need to share information with various organizations, take measures around the venues, and work on the transport of the Games. This is about our City Operations Center. The purpose was to support management of Games, as well as minimize negative impacts on daily life of Tokyo. The center was operated around the clock to collect and share information on city management, such as of COVID-19 and lifelines. Also, it placed staff around the venues to prevent accidents and other incidents. Next, about the transport. In Tokyo, where the urban functions are highly concentrated, we didn't set up the Games dedicated traffic lane, which is for the first time since the Sydney 2000 Games. Instead, we implemented the travel demand management and traffic system management. Through these efforts, the volume of traffic and flow of people were reduced, and we were able to achieve balance between the smooth transport service for the Games and economic activities as well as the lives of Tokyo residents. This is about volunteers who supported the Games. There were two types of volunteer groups. The city cast, operated by TMG, who worked around the competition venues. And the other one is a field cast, operated by the organizing committee, who worked in the competition venues and the athlete village. In the questionnaire after the Games, 80% of the city cast said they were satisfied with the activities, and 96% said they want to continue volunteering in future. We will make Tokyo a more inclusive city by the spirit of volunteerism developed during the Games and make it the permanent part of our culture. Now, the sustainability. For the Tokyo 2020 Games, we promoted initiative to use hydrogen and sustainable resources in order to reduce our environmental footprint. All the medals were made from metals collected from used cell phones, donated by the numerous citizens through the Medal Project. This effort will be the important legacy to create a comfortable, eco-friendly city. The next is the accessibility. TMG implemented various initiatives under the vision of unity in diversity. We constructed the venues according to the Tokyo 2020 accessibility guidelines. Also, we listened to the opinions of people with impairments and experts and reflected their perspectives. For example, we secured wheelchair accessible spaces and conveniently placed the toilets responding to various impairments and needs. Furthermore, we promoted accessibility of railway stations, roads, and accommodations. Taking opportunities of the Games, we have made great progress in making Tokyo barrier-free from both tangible and intangible aspects. Now, building momentum. Due to the COVID-19, we made a drastic decision to call off the live sites and events at which people gather. Instead, we created the website using digital technologies. Also, to promote the parasports, we opened the Paralympic support website. About 3 million have viewed these two websites, which exceeds the estimated visitors to the live sites and public viewing. We succeeded in gaining support from many people even under the pandemic. This slide is about the recovery from earthquake and tsunami of 2011, which is one of the important factors of the Games. We promoted the recovery from the disaster through the Games on various occasions, such as holding football, baseball, and softball in the area, tree planting as an enduring symbol of recovery, installing the recovery monuments made of scrap materials from temporary housing in the disaster-stricken area. Now, I'd like to show you the 6 new permanent facilities constructed by TMG. These facilities are planned to be reopened after removal of temporary works. In the future, through multipurpose use and collaboration with local communities, we will make them sustainable legacies that will be used and loved by many Tokyo people. We hope to invite and host major international sporting events to Tokyo to make strategic use of the competition venues. Lastly, let me talk about the legacy of the Games. It has been about 8 years since Tokyo was elected as a host city. During this time, we made numerous efforts not only to prepare for the Games, but also to look ahead to the future of Tokyo. With each of these efforts bearing fruit, the Games were able to be successful despite the historic challenges. And we can say that the Games have become the light of hope for the mankind and have brought confidence and courage to the world to move forward together. This experience is precisely the legacy of the Games, and we'll use the Games as a springboard to push Tokyo's legacy forward and enrich the lives of its people. This is my brief report on the Tokyo 2020 Games. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
So through this video, you see the hard work that all our Japanese friends have put into the preparation of the Games. And what I'm very happy to see here is a graph on COVID and the fact that we were able to contain, and they were able to contain the pandemic while welcoming the whole world to Tokyo, because it was highly debated when we were on site. And for those who have been spending a few weeks, having tests, reporting your health condition every day, and attending the press conferences every day where all the cases were reported, it's very nice to see now, the facts, and to see that we have developed together a blueprint for containing a pandemic while still hosting such a big event. Now let's look at the perspective of an international federations, and we are going to hear live the perspective of Mike Joyce and Hilary Atkinson from the International Hockey Federation. Welcome, both of you, to Copenhagen. Do we have the sound? Mike?
Good morning.
Yes, now we hear you.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can now.
Wonderful. So good morning, I'm Hilary Atkinson, Olympic Games and Pro League Director at the International Hockey Federation.
And I'm Mike Joyce, responsible for development, education, including Legacies.
Thank you firstly for inviting Mike and I to join you today to share some of the work in this area. As has been mentioned, never has there been a greater moment demonstrating the power of sport than this July and August at the Games of the 32nd Olympiad. The sustainable legacy from an Olympic Games is not something a federation achieves alone, as we've discussed throughout these past 2 days. There are many stakeholders involved in contributing to the success of what we hope will continue to be achieved for hockey following the Olympic Games in Tokyo. At a national and local level, these include the Japanese Hockey Association, the Asian Hockey Federation, Tokyo Metropolitan Government, the Organising Committee, Shinagawa and Ota prefectures, and the volunteers and people of Japan. From a global perspective, we count on our collaboration with the IOC, We're Stronger Together, our continental federations, participating nations, broadcasters, sponsors, suppliers, and fans, amongst our many contributors. Our ambitions for legacy from an Olympic Games are aligned with the strategic approach of the IOC and touch on all areas of our global operating business, from tangible infrastructure to the intangible feel-good factor generated from the event itself. Over the course of the next few slides, we'll pick some key highlights and have chosen to relate them to the 7 dimensions described. In our FIH strategic language, these are encompassed through 4 areas of participation, education, infrastructure, and inspiration.
Here's an overview of some of the local in red and the global in blue benefits of the Tokyo Olympic Games. We'd like to share a little bit more detail about 1 or 2 of these benefits. Hilary will focus on the left-hand side, where our strategic focus is on infrastructure. These are the areas that help build sustainability, capacity, and support. I'll then follow with some examples from the right-hand side around participation, education, and inspiration.
On an economic value and brand equity front, inclusion of hockey in the Olympic Games itself not only derives investment for participating nations, but fundamentally underpins the economic stability of our federation and continental federations, which in turn benefits the whole of the hockey ecosystem. The legacy from this aspect extends right from the point at which the future Games host is identified, into the pre-Games planning and host nation qualification processes, through to the post-Games afterglow effect. Being the most important shop window for our sport, the Games attracts worldwide audiences that have not experienced hockey before, in addition to our core fans. We await the findings of the evaluations in broadcast and social media. However, initial feedback from IRIS indicates strong outcomes by the FIH in the digital performance areas measured. In Tokyo, this is the first time that 7 different countries from 4 continents have been represented in the semi-final stages of the Olympic Games, thus providing the sporting platform for the broadest benefit to our brand equity possible. In Japan specifically, JHA has secured new alliances such as the Tokyo Monorail and Japan Racing Association, being 2 examples, and have seen existing sponsors re-sign with a particular focus on the next generation. Government funding has also been secured from the Japanese Sports Ministry to support investment in specialist marketing resource for JHA, which grows capacity in this area within their association. Moving to the environmental aspect of Legacy, which is a key cornerstone of our global sustainability strategy, the polygrass turfs developed for Tokyo 2020 were created using bio-based materials of 60% sugarcane and were manufactured to strict environmental management standards. This is the evolution of a long-term strategy whereby our aspiration in future games and world hockey events is to utilise a dry, elite-level turf. With the support of our supplier Polytan, significant investment is going into developing this aspect of product development and also into temporary turf products, which will enable greater usage of existing venues in the future. Tangibly less water, aside from the environmental benefits, also equates to lower ongoing costs for the venue owners, and continued investment in development of turf longevity through good maintenance and positive recycling practices are all part of the push to combine legacy and sustainability. And so to the physical legacy of Oi Hockey Stadium itself, which provides a venue for the community to lead more active and healthy lives, whilst also giving emerging talent the facilities and infrastructure to be our generation of next elite athletes. It's the only hockey venue, as has been previously mentioned, of this quality in close proximity to Tokyo. The venue is set within an existing multi-sport park and shared across two prefectures, Shinagawa and Ota City. With the support of TMG, JHA have developed a 10-year plan for the Oi Hockey Stadium, where participation and inspiration will be generated from the knowledge that the pitch has been used by global hockey stars. However, it won't only benefit hockey at this venue, as the turfs will be used also for lacrosse and tag rugby training. The lighting, legacy, and the quality of the facilities, if well maintained, leave it well positioned to go on to host and bid for future major events.
The local benefit of hosting an Olympic Games is the possibility to bring together multiple parties and organisations who previously have been operating independently, as well as providing a much needed new home for Sakura and Samurai Japan hockey teams. The Oi Hockey Stadium will play host to regular local, national and international events over the next 4 years as part of the Legacy Venue Usage Plan. The Japan National Hockey Championships and the Masters Hockey World Cup will take place for the first time in 2022. JHA has established 2 new hockey associations in Ota and Shinagawa using volunteers from the Games. Their focus is club development and participation growth. Despite significant limitations due to COVID, the multi-sport Let's 55 Tokyo Sport Experience program was impactful for hockey, both in terms of awareness for the sport in a new geographical area and participation. It's helped shape the new JHA development plans. Integrity, solidarity, inclusion, courage, and respect are the core values of hockey. As an inclusive team sport that's organically gender balanced and family focused, we believe in hockey's power to make a positive social impact. Since before the Games, JHA and Shinagawa City have been delivering projects for 6 to 9-year-olds, using hockey to develop teamwork, cooperation, listening, and communication skills. A new annual Under-10s festival will commence in June 2022 when the Olympic venue reopens. The image you see here on the slide is Siegfried Eichmann, global FIH trainer and head coach of the Japan national team. He and some of his Olympic players decided that their preferred rest and recuperation post-Games would be to tour schools and universities to inspire and engage the public of Japan. The FIH Academy, together with AHF and JHA, delivered a wide range of training and educational activities before and during the Games. Everything from language skills to social media and sports technical training courses were held. As a largely volunteer-based sport, we massively value the time and impact of our global volunteer workforce. There are many wonderful examples of volunteer legacy in hockey, particularly around the Olympic Games. Some of our volunteers in Tokyo were at their 4th or 5th Games. Our engagement with Tokyo local government project, CityCast Volunteers, has created a network of volunteers who've already been engaged to support the Masters World Cup in 2022.
As the sun sets on the extended journey that was the Tokyo Olympic Games, we're confident that we've learned many lessons from previous games that have enabled us to be better prepared and more impactful in our legacy focus. We will keep on learning. It's very early in the legacy evaluation process, and these are just the first important steps. However, we're committed to maintaining the momentum of the Games in Japan in collaboration with all parties and ensuring that the hockey benefits are felt for years to come. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hilary and Mike, for this presentation. And also highlighting the fact that if we want to maximize the legacy of the Games, we need to start early, as it was also mentioned by Marie yesterday about Paris 2024. Now, let's turn to the perspective of the IOC and what colleague Pierre Ducrey, Director for Olympic Games Operations, has to say about Tokyo 2020. He cannot be with us today because he's in Paris working with the Paris 2024 team, but we asked him before leaving Lausanne a few questions and he was kind to answer. So let's look at the first question we asked to Pierre. Takeaways that the upcoming organizing committees of Paris, Milano Cortina, Los Angeles and Brisbane and their delivery partners should keep in mind from Tokyo as they continue their Olympic Games journey.
Well, it's difficult to have 3 takeaways only, but if I had to choose 3, I probably would say first, simplification. When you have an event to deliver in a pandemic environment, you want to make sure you focus on the core elements. And even before we developed the protocols of COVID, we really looked at what are the parts of the project maybe we cannot do anymore. What is it that will not impact games delivery, the sport, the athletes, but that could be put aside to simplify the task. So for us, I would say the first key takeaway is try to simplify the task at hand, because with COVID, it gets much more complicated. So that's really, I would say, the first one. The second one, it's about collaboration. It's very clear. When you have to do a task like this, in general, the games are quite complex to deliver, but in the COVID environment, we really needed to rely on every single stakeholder even more. They developed their own rules to make sure they could follow some of the constraints we were having. We developed a number of other rules that they had to follow, and really the ability of the whole system to function together was critical in having us succeed when it comes to Tokyo. So this collaboration, I would say, and the roles that every stakeholder took in addition to its normal role really make a big difference. So I think in Tokyo, we achieved a new level of collaboration with the entire Olympic movement, and that made a real difference. And the third one probably will have to be flexibility. I think we now understand that the environment we live in can change at any point in time. A few days before the event, things can change, and that brings a lot of pressure on the organizers. So you need to build the project in a way that it can be changed at many points in time without ultimately impacting too much the result. And that's what we did in working with Tokyo 2020, preparing for different scenarios that could come our way in the lead up to the games. And we had many of those materializing. But the flexibility we had built in the operational model allowed us to deal with those circumstances and ultimately deliver the result we wanted. So the work we did on contingency planning and making sure that the circumstances will not ultimately change what we were trying to do was really fundamental. So I would say the third dimension is flexibility.
Thank you, Pierre. The second question we asked Pierre, what did we learn from Tokyo 2020 on sport and health?
I think there can be many lessons, because obviously health was at the very core of these Olympic Games. The first element that I believe will be a legacy of these games is really organizing a mass gathering in a pandemic environment. there were no blueprint for something of that dimension. And we worked with the leading experts in the world, with WHO, with the Japanese authorities, of course, to try and develop a methodology that could allow 200 plus countries coming into one country in a time where there were still a number of limitations in Japan, globally, and to do that safely. And that's what we've achieved. Our positivity rate was very low. So it means that the approach we took, combination of preventive through vaccination, but also of a number of measures on the ground of testing and social distanciation, hygiene, worked. So I would say a number of these protocols now will definitely be replicated into other mass gatherings that will take place in the world. And I think it's something really that will be a legacy of these Olympic Games. From a health perspective as well, it got a little bit pushed aside probably because of the discussions regarding COVID, but we had serious concerns regarding heat mitigation. The year before the Games, we had severe heat in Japan, and we had to work through a number of new protocols to ensure that we could compete during the Games and keep the athletes safe. So we worked with every international federation, with the Japanese government, to find protocols here as well that will allow to decide closer to the event, can it take place? Do we need to wait? Do we postpone? We moved a number of events in the schedule to try and make sure they would take place earlier or later to avoid the most difficult part of the day. We even moved the marathon to Sapporo, as a lot of people would know, to try and make sure we could have those thresholds that could put the competition at risk being respected. And we worked with the leading experts in heat mitigation in the world. A lot of protocols here have been developed and probably also will be available to other event organizers. And if I had to mention another dimension, probably will be the impact on the society in general. I think through the Games, we bring a lot of programs developed by the local communities, the government, which are pushing people to participate in sport. There's a lot of activities that would not take place without the Games being there, because the focus is really placed on sporting activity at the elite, but also at grassroots. And if we look at the statistics, I think between 2013 and 2020, sport participation in the world has been decreasing. But if you look specifically at the situation of Japan, it has increased by 7%. So we can definitely see that through the programs put in place by the government to support interest in sport and participation, we've been able, with the Games, to, of course, have a fantastic event that took place, but also to drive participation in sport up, which is so critical for health matters today.
So the third question for Pierre was, as the world is hoping to get out of the pandemic to recovery mode, what do you think are the main learnings that will be applicable for the upcoming Olympic Games?
I think if you are an upcoming game, you can see that working with the Olympic movement, you're really onboarding a team. The IOC, of course, was leading the effort with the IPC, but all of the stakeholders were part of this team. So when you set out to deliver the Games, you can tell that even if the situation gets very complicated, which it did through the pandemic, you have players in the system that will be able to support you and work with you shoulder to shoulder all the way. And I think from this perspective, that definitely is something which should be reassuring for future organizers, that even in complex environment, we can help. And I think if you are a future organizer, as well through the experience of Tokyo, you can observe that the Games is the greatest sporting event that there is. That's the one element. But through the Games, you get opportunities to do so much more. You can develop new protocols from a sustainability standpoint. We have developed with Japan new protocols for testing in a mass gathering environment. A lot of the people that are working for the Games in Tokyo are now transferring back into ministries and different agencies where they can share all of the knowledge they have developed. So through the Games, you also educate a generation of very professional experts in multitude of fields, and that's really, really important. And I would say overall, it is about progressing public policies as much as it is, delivering the event. And when all the system comes together, this collective intelligence, you can really make great things. And I think that's what we did in Tokyo.
And last but not least, you are speaking to cities from across the globe. Is there one thing they should take away from this conversation? And if there is one, what is it?
Well, for me, it is a little bit in line with what we were discussing, which is that if you are going for the games, you will create opportunities not only for the sporting community in that country, but for people at large, because there's a number of opportunities that will be created through the games to bring forward reflections on the academic side, on the health side, on the participation side, on the sustainability fronts. The games are allowing to be a platform for a lot of developments that you would not have without the opportunity of the games and the collective, I would say, efforts that comes to support the event. So if we look back at Tokyo, yes, we had fantastic 16 days of sport, but what we should look at and be even happier somehow is that we left a legacy on the health, on the sport participation front. And as a future host, I think this is something that you can look at thinking, okay, if I am going for this project, I'm going to get a great sporting event. I'm going to get people being very excited about medals and so on, but I'm also going to get all of that. And if I invest time in all of these other, maybe not as tangible legacies, but so much important, then I think the reward can be far greater. So that will be more or less where I would highlight to the future host that we can make a real difference.
So thank you very much, Pierre. You saw 3 different perspectives, and you see that there are many, many learnings from Tokyo 2020. But if I look at it with my hat as Director of Sustainable Development, I will remember them for 3 things that we actually highlighted in many different ways yesterday. I will remember them for resilience, for sustainability, and for inclusion. Resilience, because back in 2013, when my former colleague Gilbert Fely was still Executive Director of the Olympic Games, and when Tokyo was elected as a Olympic host, the vision, as you heard from the Metropolitan Government, was to make it a celebration of Japan's recovery from the earthquake 2011, from Fukushima, and also to celebrate the extraordinary international solidarity it had triggered. Obviously, the COVID pandemic completely overshadowed, the recovery of Fukushima. However, the Games became another symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of humanity working together as one, and as it was mentioned by Pierre, creating a blueprint for future events which will have to face such, crisis in the future. So resilience first, sustainability second, because in many different ways, this Olympic Games edition has featured how we can mainstream circular economy in very different applications. We learned about the reuse of some venues from 1964, but beyond that, circular economy was featured in the torch, which was made of aluminium, coming from recycled aluminium coming from Fukushima temporary housing. The medals were made of metal, gathered from the population, coming from different consumer goods. The podium was made of recycled plastic. The wood in the village came from different prefectures from across Japan and would go back to these prefectures and be used in many different ways. So this was really a topic that was mainstream throughout the Games, and I think shows a lot of possibilities for the future. But also, we heard yesterday that Tokyo is one of the cities very active as part of C40, and as such, it was important that this edition of the Games would be carbon neutral and featured also new solutions for the future towards a low carbon economy. And this is how also in this Games edition, hydrogen was featured in many different ways. In a symbolic way, it helped lead the torch and the cauldron. It was also used in mobility solutions, both for cars and for buses. But more interesting, I believe, it was used in the Olympic Village, because some of the buildings in the Olympic Village were powered by hydrogen through an hydrogen grid, which was itself supplied by hydrogen coming from Fukushima, in one of the largest hydrogen plants in the world, which is developing hydrogen based on solar panels. So I think they were very innovative solutions that we can somehow learn from. So resilience, sustainability, and last but not least, inclusion. It was something that we debated quite a lot yesterday in various presentations, from IWG to the presentation from Emily from the city of Lausanne to Skatistan. Here in Tokyo, I mean, we saw the power of the Olympic Games and how they can spread gender equality. Because with 48% participation of women in the field of play, you know, and knowing how much the games are broadcasted worldwide, it is, in my view, the most powerful platform to promote gender equality through the world. But there was also something very new and symbolic, the fact that we really encourage all the national Olympic committees to have 2 flag bearers, 1 woman and 1 man, entering the stadium together, was a very symbolic also gesture to promote gender equality. And last but not least, due to unexpected circumstances outside of the field of play, we also saw an increased participation of women in the board of Tokyo 2020, which showed a sign and paved the way for more sport organizations to increase the ratio of women in their board and governance body. When we speak about inclusion, as it was also said by the Metropolitan Government of Tokyo, the Games put a lot of emphasis on also developing a barrier-free city in the lead-up to the Paralympic Games, changing the perception of people with impairment. But it was also an edition where we have the highest number of athletes who openly said they were transgender and intersex. And the Pride House will be another legacy of these games, really putting some more focus on inclusion. And as we speak, many of you may have seen that we have just released at the IOC a framework for fairness, inclusion, and non-discrimination that we will apply in future editions of the Games. And last but not least, I mean, we spoke also about local engagement. It's impressive to see the amount of effort the Japanese put in order to engage the entire population in the lead up to the Games. They developed 150,000 initiatives across Japan, which led to 90 million individual participation in many different fields, from culture to education, sport, and environment. So as you see, only 3 months after the event, because it's only 3 months, believe it or not, after Tokyo, we already have so many key learnings from this event. And we see how some of the solutions that our Japanese friends have developed and showcased in the field of resilience, sustainability, and inclusion are of interest to all of us. Obviously, we'll continue the debrief, and we will have a formal debrief next summer after Beijing 2022. But once more, if we want to be more resilient, more sustainable, and more inclusive, we need, as we saw, to work very closely together in solidarity. And at the IOC, we stand ready and very committed to partner with all of you to leverage the Olympic Games as a catalyst for change to build a better world. Thank you very much.